Hello, welcome to our third podcast. This one is called Changing to Stay the Same, and it's a continuation of that slippery question, what is life? Here is a wonderful picture of a blue and yellow macaw, and next to it the essential questions of biology. These are holistic questions. How is it built? How does it work? How did it evolve? We saw last time that life resisted a simple one-sentence definition and is more like a verb than a noun. Here is a list of active verbs that we met last time. Feeding, respiring, metabolizing, reproducing, making messes, maintaining a constant internal environment, growing, repairing, responding, moving around, and of course evolving. Let's look at some of the more nuanced properties of life. For a start, there's a high degree of order and complexity. Consider your own body consists of about 7 trillion cells, and in each one of your cells there are 46 chromosomes containing your entire genome. It consists of about 30 billion DNA bases. Now this is incredibly complex, but the good news is that it's the same set of macromolecules for all organisms. Also on the diversity and uniformity theme, think of biodiversity, something very relevant to environmental systems and societies. Think of the great variety of species on the planet. Here are some wonderfully prehistoric looking tree ferns. But there are probably about 3 million different varieties of beetles, most of them in tropical rainforests. If you or I were lucky enough to join a rainforest expedition and we entered the tree canopy and collected insects, the chances are that we would find a new species. Organisms. It's an interesting word. Be careful how you say it. One way of appreciating the complexity of biology is understanding a hierarchy of structural levels. So beginning with atoms, which are the building blocks of life. Atoms are arranged into complex molecules, proteins for example, and then the molecules are arranged into tiny cellular components called organelles. Organelles, things like mitochondria, nuclei, ribosomes, are arranged into cells, which are the basic units of life. In a multicellular organism, the cells are specialized, arranged into tissues, nervous tissue, stomach lining, blood cells, muscle cells, that kind of thing. The tissues are arranged into organs. The stomach, for example, consists of 3 layers of muscle and various secretory cells, secreting, for example, hydrochloric acid, mucus, and protein digesting enzymes. This is an important level. The organs are arranged into the organism, of course, the species level, actual plants and animals, bacteria and so on. Population is a localized group of organisms belonging to the same species. Groups of interacting populations on a local scale is a community, and a very important level in terms of environmental systems and societies is the ecosystem level. The next level of organization, very important, is the biome. These are major geographical regions like Arctic tundra, tropical rainforest. Finally, looking at the Earth as a whole, as a living planet, the biosphere, sometimes referred to as Gaia. We're mostly concerned with groups of organisms interacting in ecosystems and also taking often a global perspective. But beyond the biosphere, of course, there are other hierarchical levels in science. We do have 41 orders of magnitude that we know about. For example, beyond the biosphere is the solar system, galaxies, and the universe itself. And at the other end of the scale we have atoms, of course, made of subatomic particles, protons, neutrons and electrons. And we now know that protons and neutrons are made up of triplets of tiny particles called quarks. And here, just to remind you that we have a hierarchy of classification in order to name and organize all the different species on the planet, ranging from genus and species, which is the Latin name, to groupings like family, order, class, phylum, the 5 kingdoms, the 3 domains, and I guess everything could be arranged into a single grouping at the end, life itself. And finally, here's a useful slide. You can see here a molecule of DNA, which is contained in the nucleus, which is an organelle, inside a nerve cell. And that nerve cell is part of a bunch of nervous tissue inside the brain of a pelican, in this case. And the brain is part of an organ system. The nervous system of the pelican consists of the brain, the spinal cord, and various peripheral nerves. And here's the pelican itself, brown pelican. And then we can imagine pelicans organized into populations. And here on the Florida coast, a bunch of organisms interacting, a bunch of populations, pelicans and other birds, and what they feed on. And then the Florida coast as an ecosystem. And finally, all the ecosystems arranged into biomes, and the sum of all the biomes in the biosphere itself. So the hierarchy we've just looked at is really important for organizing our thinking, but a narrow focus on a single level of biological organization depreciates the fun and the power of biology. At each level of organization there are emergent properties. With each step upward in the hierarchy of biological order, novel properties emerge that were not present at the simpler levels of organization. These are called emergent properties, and they result from interactions between the components. A molecule such as a protein has attributes not exhibited by any of its component atoms, and a cell is certainly much more than a bag of molecules. An organism is a living, synergistic whole, greater than the sum of its parts. Let's take another holistic view of our Caledonian crested gecko. And we can see him as a black box with various inputs like food and oxygen, and outputs like carbon dioxide, water, and the excretory messes that he makes. Each person here gets a new stomach lining every 5 days, and a new liver every 2 months. The skin replaces itself every 6 weeks, and every year 98% of the atoms in a human body are replaced. An autopoietic entity metabolizes continuously. Life entails energy expenditure and the making of messes. We are changing to stay the same. But what about this old Cadillac? It certainly takes in fuel. It burns gasoline in oxygen, and out of the exhaust pipe comes waste materials, carbon dioxide and water. And certainly if it breaks down, we can replace spare parts. But it isn't alive, is it? It seems like an easy question. We know life when we see it. But what are the essential differences between this car and a living organism? After viewing this flipcast a couple of times, we're going to return to our collaborative classroom and address some slippery questions about the problems of defining life. And we're going to be looking at some interesting structures. For example, copper sulfate crystals can reproduce, but are they alive? And candles and tornadoes are recognizable dynamic organized units of matter, and they're formed by energy flow, and to some extent they are changing to stay the same. What are the similarities and differences between these dissipated structures and real living entities? And that's the end of this flipcast. And once again, let me say to you, be careful out there and never ever stop thinking.